I think the subject today should be, given the conditions, especially, that we should the subject is war. Now, we have from leading circles in Germany and elsewhere, and from some rather powerful forces included, that we are on the edge of World War III. And that's not a distant forecast, that's a rather short-term prospect. How short-term, we don't know, but we're getting very quickly at an accelerating rate into the likelihood of something like World War III, and the worst of them so far. And so you can't say, let's forget this, let's not talk about it, maybe it won't happen, which is what the idiots all say. The idiots and cowards will all whimper that sort of thing. Fact is, we are already, actually, if you understand history at all, we're now on the verge of World War III. That's not a distant one, that can come very quickly. And that is already a concern among some leading governments, or leading circles of leading governments, as of now. The idea that this is improbable is for idiots and cowards to believe. It is highly probable. It is not yet certain, but it is highly probable. And everything you do must take this high probability into account as a leading factor in your public and personal decisions. That's the way it is. Now, to understand that, look back at 2 world wars, both of which reached their peak through the development of a Balkan War. Balkan upsurges. And therefore you had a situation of Europe pivoted on the Balkans. And the war was organized around the Balkans. This went to the Soviet Union, to Russia earlier, and it comes back to, again, Russia's role today. Russia has found itself for the 3rd time caught in a British orchestrated world war. And this is the 3rd time around, and the world war is very likely now, unless very specific actions are taken to avert it. Now, we don't have a Balkan War now in store. Now, but look at the planet a little differently. What's the difference in the planet now and what it was in 2 preceding world wars? The first one involved, essentially, Japan was involved, and I shall explain to you how that happened, because that's very significant in understanding this. So that was there, potentially, in World War I, but not significantly. It was also significant in a different way in World War II. And it will be also a factor in World War III, similarly. But the other part of the geography has changed greatly. We used to have a Balkan War. We had 2 cases which a Balkan War was the generation of a world war, or what was called a world war. Now it has shifted to where? To the so-called Middle East. The Middle East has been becoming and is the new Balkans for a 3rd World War. When you understand this, you begin to get the picture. Begin to get the smell of what's coming on. Look at Palestine, look at Jordan, look at the various Arab states, look at Afghanistan, and look, in a sense, really at Pakistan. Because Pakistan is actually a part of the British-controlled New Balkans. So therefore now you have a cockpit of incendiary cockpit to trigger a general war on the continent and into the United States naturally. That's what's here right now. This is triggered largely by the fact that it is an impossible financial monetary crisis throughout the world, especially in the transatlantic centered area. So we're looking at the preconditions of world war. Now, what I'm saying is being replicated in these days in leading circles in certain parts of Europe and certain parts of the United States, among certain influentials, including diplomats and so forth, who are cognizant of this from their view in the United States outward. The smell is that we're on the verge of what was then on August, the guns of August. Now it will come in a different month. But the analogy to the guns of August in two world wars, wars organized by the British Empire, deliberately provoked by the British Empire. This involves another concept which is essential to understand these things. What is the British Empire, and who's the idiot who doesn't believe there's a British Empire? There is nothing but a British Empire. It controls Europe right now, Western and Central Europe. It controls all of Africa. It controls essentially the so-called Middle East. It affects other parts of the world. This is an empire. It's the fourth Roman Empire, still. There are no nations in Central and Western Europe. None. They're all part of a new Euro system, a governance, a colony of the British Empire. That's what was set up when the wall fell down in Germany. The British and the French president made an edict to create a Euro system, and the French president said, if you don't go along with it, we're going to make war on you. That was the French president threatened war against Germany if Germany did not concede to a European system, that is, giving up the sovereignty of the nations of Western and Central Europe. That's the trigger of war. Now what happens now, this system begins to crumble. The British activate their control of this system, the so-called Euro system, to create a crisis. They stick up two pigs in as successive presidents of the United States. George W. Bush Jr., and now the pig of all pigs, Obama. The worst piece of shit that ever was plucked in any government since the Emperor Nero. Now we have we've reached a point of absolute bankruptcy of the international monetary system, especially in the transatlantic region. The nations collectively of the transatlantic region are now hopelessly bankrupt. That does not mean that we could not get out of this bankruptcy in terms of absolute terms. All we have to do is take the Glass-Steagall approach and apply it to the transatlantic region, starting from the United States, and that would immediately bring us an option for economic survival. All we have to do is put this thing through bankruptcy, which means wipe out most of the money that's on the accounts. Just wipe it out. That can be managed. I know exactly how to manage that. It's an elementary operation. So if you're willing to make a bankruptcy reorganization of a bankrupt transatlantic system, you can get out of this mess. But the British Empire would be liquidated. In other words, we would have to go through a financial reform which would in effect liquidate everything that's represented by the British Empire internationally. It would be in the home country of Britain, but every other part of the British Empire, and it is a British Empire, the planet is occupied largely by the British Empire. But a lot of people don't know what an empire is. And this is an empire. It's the Fourth Roman Empire. And it's a legacy of the oligarchical system from before then. And the oligarchical system is fighting not for a nation. It's not a national interest. It's a global oligarchical interest which hates the idea of the sovereign nation state. In other words, reorganizing this planet to get through this bankruptcy of the world system, especially the transatlantic region, is perfectly feasible. Because money is only paper. And even counting out large numbers of money is only paper. The essence of economy is not money, it's credit. Because the basis of trade is credit. The basis of organized economy is credit. Now, usually we've had a situation where the credit system is controlled through a monetarist factor which makes the credit system itself merely a colony of a monetarist system. We have now the bailout system. And Glass-Steagall was a concept of the kind of idea which shows how you deal to control and eliminate the imperialist factor in a monetary system. All you have to do is establish the authority of a credit system which is regulated by governments. A government and governments. Then you can solve the problem. But if you don't want to do that and solve the problem, then the empire, which is the other contention here against the nation states, will then act to put the nation states, or what would be the nation states, even without nation state power, put them into conflict with each other, arranging a big shootout party, and thus destroy the nation states through war, just the way they killed the United States and began to by killing Jack Kennedy. And killing Jack Kennedy and launching the Indochina War, which Kennedy was preventing, they eliminated him in order to have an Indochina War. And what happened is the Indochina War became the engine of the destruction of the U.S. economy. Since Jack Kennedy was killed, the U.S. economy has been going down in physical terms. All these years. Now we've come to a point of a break point, of a collapse, which the assassination of Kennedy was key in producing. Now they have us. They have us sucked on the tit of money, of fake money. Now it comes to the point that the fake money system has come to an end. You can no longer continue over more than days to speak of this money system. It's going to blow out. Money of any sort is about to become totally worthless. Don't worry about your money, there's nothing there except the nominal idea of purchasing power. And once the wisp of purchasing power vanishes, you're all bankrupt. You're all dead. Unless you go to the reform in the system. In fact, to go to a credit system. A credit system installed by me tomorrow would be a viable solution. Without a credit system being installed, that's why Glass-Steagall will not exist as long as Obama is president. And the world will go to hell if Obama continues to be president. Because his ability to control the United States on behalf of the British is the thing that's holding this whole system together. And when the system is about to crack, World War III breaks out. And exactly what succession, we don't know. But we have to stop this crap now. Otherwise, no nation, no world. At least not one fit to live in. Now, how does this work? Now, just think about two world wars. The two world wars were caused by the British anger over the existence of the United States and its power, and Germany. And the intention was to have a war between Russia and Germany. And the war was started by the assassination of the President of France. And that caused a chain reaction process under the Crown Prince of Britain, because his mother wasn't too functional. She had a funny lover up in Scotland, and she was not too much concerned with things in other parts of the world. So the son, the Crown Prince, was the actual figure, controlling figure, who orchestrated World War I. How did it happen? Well, they started it. How did they start it? Well, the Crown Prince went to visit the Mikado. And they struck an agreement about 1892-93, in which they agreed to form an alliance to destroy China in a new war against China, and then to go on with other things like Korea and take on Russia in the eastern part of Russia, the 1905 Russian War. This set up the stage for World War I as such. So actually, from the assassination of Sadi Carnot as President of France, first Bismarck was thrown out on orders of London. So Germany was set up for a war between Germany and Russia. And in 1905, in a trip on their yacht in the Baltic Sea, the Kaiser and the Tsar said, our cousin, the British heir, is trying to get us killed. They want us to kill each other. We're not going to do that. What do you know? They did it. So you had a setup in which you had a Balkan War, which had been, since the 1880s, had been the intention which Bismarck prevented, of a Balkan War orchestrated by the senile Prime Minister or King of Emperor of Austria, was going to organize a Balkan War. And what was going to happen was the various parties would become interested in the Balkan War. And the Tsar was under pressure because of the attachment to the Balkans of Russia, ethnic attachment, to intervene with Russian troops into the Balkans against the Austrians and others. And therefore, Germany was going to be pushed into attacking Russia in assistance of the Austrian emperor, who was a senile old bag. Bismarck had stopped that. Bismarck had cut underneath the knowledge of his emperor, his Kaiser, had made a secret agreement with the Russian Tsar that under no circumstances would Bismarck allow the German system to enter into an alliance with Russia in the matter of the Balkan affair. And therefore they would keep Russia from intervening in the Balkan War. And this is what prevented World War II, or World War I, from breaking out when it could have. So the first thing they had to do to get a war started was get Bismarck out of office. So in 1890, they put Bismarck out of office under orders from the Crown Prince of the British Empire. Then you went through a process, the assassination of the President of France, Sadi Carnot. Hell broke out in France. France became totally corrupted again. And we were on the road toward World War I, which Bismarck, now out of office, characterized as a new 7 Years' War. The 7 Years' War was a war which was organized to create the British Empire. What the British Empire did before it became known as an empire was to organize a war or series of warfare events throughout continental Europe, minus the Netherlands and Britain. They sat on the outside and actually orchestrated the financing of this war, the 7 Years' War. This occurred also in the United States, or what became the United States, in terms of the American fought war of defense against the French operations in the 7 Years' War. So, and here's the Prussian Kaiser of the time, Prussian president at the time, involved in this 7 Years' War. The issue of the 7 Years' War was the Americas and India. The British was determined to control, to have absolute control over the new American developments, in states, whatever, and India. And the big quarrel outside of North America was India. The war between French and British forces for the seizure of control of India, which is a very bloody, ugly mess. One of the most evil things done on this planet. More people were killed. You want to talk about genocide? The British takeover of India was a case of genocide. So these were the conditions. Now, going into this kind of condition, coming up into the beginning of the 20th century, you now get first, the first set of the war is organized with the new war against China, with Korea and Russia in the East as the first targets over the period 1893-94 to 1905 and beyond. So now the tale was set for the British Empire to eliminate, through warfare, to eliminate Germany as an independent factor whose sympathies had been with the United States earlier, to the British. To set up the war, which involved putting the two great land powers of Europe, Germany and Russia, forget the whole Habsburg cabbage there, to put them against each other, thus creating a control over continental Eurasia by the rising British Empire. What would happen to facilitate this process? The President of France was assassinated, organized by European sources, which sent the assassin into the United States, and using a traitor against the United States, an heir of the Confederacy, Teddy Roosevelt, as president. So because of Teddy Roosevelt, the United States was involved in World War I. And that misshaped our existence. So we lived through a virtual fascist trend in the Americas based on the Confederacy principle. Woodrow Wilson, for example, came out of a Confederate family. He was a Confederate royalist. He was the one that reorganized from the White House the Ku Klux Klan. The revival of the Ku Klux Klan came through Woodrow Wilson, the President of the United States, who came from a slave-owning Confederacy family. Teddy Roosevelt was the nephew of the chief spy of the Confederacy, operating from London. So we had this pollution going into the 1920s of the political system of the United States, the Democratic Party as well as the Republican, which was virtually fascist, was the basis for fascism in America, the Confederacy. And thus, Franklin Roosevelt, who represented a deeper aspect of our United States, a deeper tradition. For example, his ancestor, Isaac Roosevelt, who founded the Bank of New York, was actually a part of the Hamilton apparatus. So we had a deep-rooted, multi-generationally deep-rooted American tendency which surged back to the onset of the Depression, to Franklin Roosevelt, and reestablished the United States in principle. But then died, and the same Confederate-linked craps among the Republicans and others took back power to a piece of shit called Harry Truman. And the Roosevelt's program was completely shattered insofar as it was possible at that time. We had, the Kennedys came in on top of Eisenhower to try to bring some stability and reassertion of the United States. Then when Jack Kennedy was killed, assassinated, by the British interests, who wanted a war in Indochina in order to do this kind of warfare to drain the United States, as it did with 10 years of war in Indochina, which ruined the United States morally, financially, and everything else. And we have never had a step of progress, of actual economic progress in the United States in that effect since the assassination of Jack Kennedy. The Indochina War was a key factor in ruining us. And we have never recovered, economically or otherwise, from that effect. All we have to deal with is to go to the deep roots of our culture. And the deep roots of the culture, the legacy of our American tradition still lives. And that's all we have to count on, is the effect of that legacy, which in effect, from the top of running the government, is a minority in the United States leading circles. The majority of U.S. leading circles are traitors to the United States. Now, this is being the situation, and we being wrecked, and we being ass-kissers for the British Empire, we're now set up with the new Balkans, which is the so-called Middle East complex. And look at the wars that have been fomented, and similar kinds of operations fomented in that region since Eisenhower left the presidency. Eisenhower stopped this process while he was president. And he threatened to go to war against the British. They got them scared. But when Eisenhower was no longer president, and after Jack Kennedy was assassinated, there was no stopping the British from inside the United States. Only characters like me, who knew what the game was, and knew what the issue was. Now we've come full cycle. We're now back at the edge of World War IV. The whole system is ready to come down. We've come to the point that this system cannot be perpetuated. There's no possibility of perpetuating this system much further. It's being strained beyond belief already. We're on the end of civilization. That's where we're perched. Now you take all this area of conflict, Pakistan, the so-called Middle East generally, are all part of a package which has been cooked in warfare, perpetual warfare in these regions all of these years. This is the new Balkans. Now you have a tangle pivoted on places like Syria. The present government of Syria is the major bloc against World War III, strategically. And the hatred against the present Syrian government is a reflection of the British intent to have a new world war. The whole area from Turkey on down to this whole area through Pakistan, to Afghanistan, is an area of perpetual warfare, exactly like, physically, politically, strategically, exactly like the Balkans of yore. What you have, the Middle East, so-called, is now the site of a new ongoing Balkan War, whose function is the same function as the old Balkan Wars, to engage Europe and beyond into self-destruction through warfare. And we've now reached the point there is no more latitude for the British system in its present form. The present world monetarist system cannot continue to exist in its present form. The strain is too great. There is no value in any of this stuff. It's pure hyperinflationary crap. We're now at a point economically tantamount to Germany in 1923, in October 1923. So we've come to a defined point of decision, a predefined point of decision, now. And we're on the edge of World War III and IV, of a perpetual state of warfare throughout the planet, aimed at the decimation of the human population of this planet from 7 billion people to less than 2, less than 1. Used to be less than 2. And that's where we are. This is the truth of the matter. There is no contrary truth. This is it. The stage is set. People in places like Russia, parts of Europe, in Germany, for example, are generally aware of this condition. Other parts of the world are also aware of this condition. We're now on the threshold of a new world war. The new and the worst so far. That's what's hitting us now. And what we're dealing with in the United States among the population and among many of the leading circles, political circles and others, are like blind fools stumbling into their own destruction by their own hand, their own foolishness. We are on the edge of World War III right now. You can almost count it in days, something like that. We are very short, on a very short leash. And what happened in terms of the operation in Libya would push us over the threshold. The assassination of Gaddafi and his party has put the world on the tenterhooks. We're now on the edge of World War III because of the Libya operation. Now, if you want to understand this, you have to look at the minds of people in Europe and elsewhere who are aware of this. Russia is aware of this. China is aware of this. Other nations are aware of this. We're on the verge of hell. You'll have idiots who will not face this reality, who will say, no, he's exaggerating. He's exaggerating. I'm not exaggerating. This is it. It's here now. And only fools don't agree with me. Either fools because they don't know what's going on, or because they aren't able to think clearly. One of the two. Or maybe a combination of the two. You're engaged in war. And in warfare, you focus on victory. You focus on defeating, outflanking and defeating major forces. And you do it with limited forces. The domain you wipe with the war is fought in as essentially the mind, the human mind. It's fought in the dimensions of the human mind, not in the physical weapons. The physical weapons are useless without the factor of the human mind. And that's where we are. We're now at the threshold as we go into this weekend event in San Francisco area. We're now, at this time, also, while celebrating this event in San Francisco, we're also participating in the onrush of a threatened new world war, coming out of a collapse, an inevitable collapse of the present transatlantic system, financial economic system. This system is doomed. It can no longer exist in its present form. It's gone. We have a Balkan War already prepared for us. carefully prepared by the British over the course since World War II. This is the trap, because you have nations in that area where Russia has significant interest, where the British also have significant conflicting interests. Therefore, the collision now comes between Russia and the British Empire. And you have dragged along, as India is dragged into this, whose own interests demand that it not ally with the British, which is a big strain for the Indians. Then there's the American factor, which we represent. Nobody else but us represents that. There are other people who, as individuals, are part of it. But there is no organized commitment except in the sense of what the kind we do is an intelligence factor. Only our role is an intelligence factor, which is tied to other patriotic, often hidden forces inside the United States. That's it. And we have to stop World War III before it happens. So let's not get our minds taken away from the attention to the real issue. The real issue is not some event we're going to do. It's not some stunt we're going to pull, which is supposed to pull the rabbit out of the hat. The issue is, what can we do as an effective force to control this process by flanking it? And we have the capability of ideas which no other factor in this country has for dealing with this. It's an intelligence factor. And that's all we've got. It's only on ideas. Suddenly you get in a situation like this, and numbers do mean something. But numbers do not define the way things are going to go. Sheer numbers don't mean anything as such, except mobs. What means something is intelligence. What means something is the ability of some human minds to provide guidance for the rescue of a nation or civilization as a whole. It has always been a tiny minority of the population, a tiny intelligentsia within the population, which is the mind which must determine the outcome of a crisis. It is not getting a majority. You will never get a majority. Majorities don't count for anything. They're not intelligent enough to account for anything. We don't have intelligent majorities. We have idiotic minorities or majorities. Competence lies only in tiny minorities of the total population. It is not the number of people that count. It's the quality of the mind of some people that counts. You have the quality of mind as a available potential leadership when all the other minds have disintegrated functionally. Whereas some group of minds understands what to do and is capable of leading an action which can lead to that result. So don't start counting numbers and say how many people you got. Look like that mess in New York City, huh? The sitting mess. What's that worth? Mama. What is it, Mama? What is this stuff out there? Like some kind of crummy stuff or slime that slid over some parts of lower Manhattan. Huh? It doesn't mean anything. It's not going anyplace. It's just going to be part of the rot. It'll be assimilated into the general rot as a result. Like the tea party. Huh? Who put coffee in my tea? We don't allow coffee in our tea. So that's where we stand. And it's our function as an intelligence operation in this situation which is decisive. And our connections internationally with people who are reflecting on the same things, more or less, that we're reflecting on, who are intelligent enough to recognize this and have the guts to think it through. And that's what we're running into. We're running into small groups and fairly much larger groups in leadership in various parts of the world, who tend to recognize this or who are perplexed because they see this coming, what is generally seen now throughout relevant circles in the world, as in Germany, as we have direct knowledge in Germany of this sort of thing, and at other places, they understand we are headed toward World War III now, on the short term, and that the trigger which is set off the explosive charge is what happened in Libya. The mass killing of Gaddafi and his circle has set into motion, triggered, what is lying as an explosive charge in the Balkan, or the new Balkans, which is that part of Asia, the Near East part of Asia, from the coast to the borders of Pakistan, the borders of India. This whole area is the new Balkans. The charge is set and the fuse is lit. Now, and the ignition was provided by the fact that the international financial system was about to go into a sudden collapse. That approach to a sudden collapse put an end to the possibility of continuing the present games. So reality, not some wild impulse, has set World War III into motion. And what we're trying to do is stop that war. Because once it starts, you won't be getting up. It's this new Balkans. It's this center from Asia Minor, going as far as into the mountain area, as far as Pakistan. This is the center, this is the new Balkans. And it's cooking now. You got the head of state of Israel. He's a major British factor, a British controlled factor in orchestrating World War III. That's exactly what it is. This area, this is the new Balkans. You have to look at it as the Balkans. And that area specifically is the crossroads of the world, which used to be located in the Suez Canal. The Suez Canal is the crossroads of the world. And it's the Asian side of that crossroad which defines the cockpit. And you have to look at that cockpit and nothing but that cockpit as a thing, a separate, distinct thing. That cockpit of Near Asia is the pivot on which World War III hangs. And nothing else has that significance. Nowhere near to it. It's all entirely that cockpit. And you see now the significance of Israel and its role under its present crazy, loony leadership in this process. Israel is the key, controlled by Britain, a British agent, combined with Saudi Arabia. So Israel and Saudi Arabia are the cockpit, the pivot of World War III. When you understand that, you can see the issue clearly. You block that, the issue is not so clear. Aspects of the issue can be clear, but the issue itself is not clear. Now this is what's understood by leading circles among leading forces. We're on the edge of this war now. This is the new Balkan, and inside the new Balkans are Saudi Arabia and Israel, which are the two key control points for the British operation against the world. Just like the Balkans of former wars. And once you see that, then you can see clearly what the threat is. If you block out these factors, you don't understand how the war is organized. If you don't understand how the war is organized, you can't intellectually cope with it. You can't judge it competently. You can judge competently on timing only when the factors are known to you and when you don't block on accepting the fact that they exist. Only when you begin to see this region as the new Balkans playing the same role on the world scale that the old Balkans did in World War I and II, then you understand the precise term of timing. You say, when is the point where the fuse burns down to the detonation point? And that's all you have to know at that point. The fuse, which is the financial fuse, is burning down to the point of the explosion. And the control factors in that will be what is done by the Saudis, who did what we know is 9/11 was a Saudi operation done on behalf of the British. This is the same kind of thing. You've got this crazy Netanyahu, who's playing a similar role, complementing Saudis precisely in Israel. And so as long as you have something like Netanyahu, that faction is in charge of Israel, Israel becomes this kind of a factor, unless they decide to throw him out. And Israel's a very funny state because they can be very rambunctious at times and decide not to go along with something. So there are still factors, including the factors inside Israel, the government of Israel, who will go against this under the right conditions, but will be afraid to do so. Because this is a British-controlled area, and you have the Saudi factor against the Israeli factor becomes the way in which this thing is, the core of the bomb is structured. Just any Middle East conflict now, at this point, in this complex, can be the trigger for setting off World War III. And that's immediate. And our question is we have to clearly understand that this is the problem, not dance around guesswork. This has a very precise character, and it can be understood from the standpoint of history. And unfortunately, very few people actually know much about history. They have explanations which don't mean anything, except nuisance. The British are the ones, the puppet masters. And Tony Blair is an agent of the puppet masters. Mm-hmm. Therefore, his efforts, as they have been in that region in particular, Blair's operation in the Middle East is entirely this. His role with respect to the United States is a reflection of his role with respect to the Middle East. It's reciprocal. We are now in a situation where, as in World War I and as in World War II, you can smell the factors which will be the detonators of a general war. But you're blind to the actual internal guts of the way this machinery works. Therefore, you say, yeah, there's a danger, there's a problem here, yeah. They don't see an immediate, calculable. They don't think like a competent commanding general in warfare. A commanding general and his staff in warfare go to precise calculations of how and when something might happen, and are prepared to deal with that something if it is actually in the process of happening. That's the decision in warfare is made, in general warfare, is made by competent generals on this basis. You don't say maybe. You say when and how and by what means. When, how, by what means. That's all you should concentrate on. I've described today what the situation is. And it breaks down to how, when, what's the determining of when. When the money is running out. Because that's the logistics of warfare are then crippled when the money runs out. Therefore, you have to strike before the money runs out. The money is now running out with a hyperinflation, which is killing the money. So when is now? Huh? In the immediate vicinity of now. Where? Well, the new Balkan factor tells you how. Then you have to look at the ties and connections of various nations and national forces on the planet and these terms of reference. That tells you where? The New Balkans. Now you are able to locate the ties of and this is being done in the leading chancelleries and intelligence services of leading nations now. That's why many nations have leading forces in them which agree with me on the fact that we are in danger of an immediate outbreak of general warfare on this planet. So you can calculate this, not necessarily by looking up at a calendar and trying to put your finger on a date, but you calculate this in exactly that way. When is the money about to run out? When are the resources about to run out which are needed to launch a general war? And you're now. Where is the pitch? Where's the pivot? The new Middle East. The new Balkans in the new Middle East. A well-known area, densely populated with U.S. and other troops. Think of the commitment of U.S. and other troops which are now committed. And think also of the irregular troops, especially, because the irregular troops, like coming out of southern Vermont, out of Cheney and Company, that's a key factor. The entire so-called Middle East is saturated with Saudi, Israeli intelligence, and other forces which are involved in this cockpit. All right, so you have the cockpit is defined. You have the timing defined, when the money is running out. Then you think of the money run out like a fuse burning down to the ignition point. And as the money runs out, round the fuse comes the spark. And when it hits the detonating point, it blows off. Time is set, defined. So the remedies are defined. We know what the forces are, how they're going to be engaged. There may be changes in the process, but you have to understand the process to understand the changes and to forecast the changes. And leading governments, or leading circles within governments, especially intelligence-related, diplomatic and other forces, understand this fact. The war is coming down now, which means we have to stop it now. The best way to stop it is throw this son of a bitch out of the presidency. That will stop it. So what do we have to do? We don't have to pass Glass-Steagall, because we can't pass Glass-Steagall unless we throw the president out first. If you can't throw the president out, you're not going to get Glass-Steagall. So going around and saying Glass-Steagall is our victory, wait a minute, buddy, you're leaving something out. Throwing Obama out is the step that you have to take before trying to get Glass-Steagall. You won't get Glass-Steagall unless you throw this president out. So therefore, Glass-Steagall is no solution unless you throw this president out. If you go around and say, well, we're working for Glass-Steagall, you're an idiot. You say we need Glass-Steagall, but we have to get Obama out first, otherwise we will not get Glass-Steagall. And if we don't get Glass-Steagall, we're going to die. That means that if you don't throw the president out, you're going to die. That's your decision making. That's your strategic decision. Have you got the guts to do it? If you can't do it, you lack the guts to survive. You must throw this president out of office now. You can't shoot him, because that would play into the enemy's game. You've got to get him out. Or you've got to do it now, and you've got to do nothing but do that now. Get him the hell out of there. If you won't get him the hell out of there, you're not going to make it. You and your family and everything else are smashed and destroyed if you don't do it. So when someone says we're for Glass-Steagall, we get this in our stuff. Emphasize Glass-Steagall, emphasize Glass-Steagall. Only think positively. Don't think negatively. You know, if you don't get that son of a bitch out, you're not going to accomplish anything. And since you've been told that, if you're not doing it, you're some kind of a coward or an agent. Or just plain damn fool. That's the option. Throw this son of a bitch out. Put him in a cage someplace. He's only a British agent. We won't miss him much. We'll put him in a zoo someplace where, you know, psychiatrists of the world can congregate and examine the specimen and find out how these new Neros function. He's a Nero. So put him in a cage. Otherwise, he'll commit suicide. Obama is probably, if he fails, he'll commit suicide. He cannot live under the circumstances that he's cheated of what he wants. And he will commit suicide exactly as Nero did. He is a duplicate of Nero in that sense. Now these things are all predictable if you don't make a mess of your mind. You have the transatlantic side of the world is a hopeless mess from a strategic standpoint. There's no positive outcome that can come from this in and of itself. So Russia and China have come to agreements which are sort of organically built into their history of their relationship. Despite all the quarrels and so forth, this has all its meaning. Khrushchev was a British agent, and Chinese had their own British agents too. So you have two processes, the intellectual process of a bunch of people who are largely agents, opportunists, usually of the British type. And you have a deeper process which represents an organic perception of national interest. Now, if a nation develops an accurate sense of the nature of its interest, then it will begin to think in terms of that interest, and if that nation has intellectual capabilities and other capabilities, it will develop a response in response to these conditions. This is what has happened. Now, what's happened on the other side, on the transatlantic side, is the idiots have taken over. The lunatics are in charge. Look at our government. It's a pack of lunatics. We've had two presidents, the previous one and the current one, who are clinically insane, depraved and insane. So that's our problem. Our system, in terms of its Congress and so forth, the other institutions of government, are clinically insane in terms of the way they function. They're incapable of a competent decision unless we can impose it upon them in some way, usually by circumstances, or by taking advantage of circumstances as they develop. So that's where we are. We're now in a situation where I can calculate a potential for victory in this conflict. Clear one. The preconditions exist. They are never guaranteed, but the relevant preconditions exist, and we don't have an alternative. We don't have an alternative option. Either a determined force in action acts now, or there is no remedy. Sentiment will get you nowhere. Reality is everything. And what I count on most is my own ability and the ability of others to do the kind of thinking that is needed to solve these problems, these challenges. And I've been at this a long time, and I don't know of much outside, apart from that, which is worth considering. There are people and forces in this country and in other countries which are relevant. But the combination of those forces is the only thing we have. That kind of leadership is the only thing that can lead to an actual solution at this time. All the usual alternatives are not worth anything right now. The die has been cast. The situation is predictable, at least to a very high degree. And that's what the game you have to play. That's the only option you have. Just think of so-called world wars and major wars in history and falls, entire collapses of civilizations in history. You're now trapped in that kind of reality. And the best guess is the best guess. And the closer it is to actual knowledge, the better. We now have interests expressed in the Eurasian area, which are a powerful factor for the good. In Europe, you have nothing but weakness. In the reading circles of North America, you have nothing but weakness. A handful of sprinkling of people here and there who have enough brains to be able to provide some leadership, if they're given the leeway to do it. So you have to sort of destroy the influence of those who are the obstacles. It's like war in general. It's like general warfare. Warfare is not something. It's not a game. It's a lawful expression of a human process. And if you don't understand it, you don't understand humanity, practically. As I laid out, I mean, how do we know this thing? How can we calculate this thing? It's calculable. But people get emotional, run around screaming about abstractions and so forth, and they don't get at the calculable features of forecasting. The important thing about humanity and about statecraft is nothing other than the human mind. The quality of functioning of the human mind is the basis of all reality. And you have to go from the human mind to the activities which are organized through the human mind and the way they're directed. And that's the clue to everything. History is more easily understood, in a sense, than most people would imagine. As I've indicated some of the parameters, how do you figure out a war situation? And the war situation at present is very clearly known. It's clearly, the whole mechanism is known. From a standpoint of command, I know it myself, exactly what the order, the structure of the command structure is, what the strategic decisions are, how they're made, how they should be made. That's where we are. And it's our ability to think clearly and constructively, which is our weapon. Everything else is a product of that weapon, if it's any good. All the usual thinking about these things is nonsense. We're now at the point. Here as we sit here now this afternoon. Here we are. We have in our hands, implicitly, the knowledge to understand exactly what is about to happen, to understand the alternatives which that poses, and to be able to situate our own activities to engage the issue in exactly the right terms. That's the best anyone can do. It's the best we can do. And we have to stick to that, because any change from that is a disaster, a complete failure. The human behavior is not based on the opinions of individuals as such. Human behavior is based on higher considerations, on the notions of an accurate choice of principle. And it's not the manipulation of forces like chess pieces on a board. It's principle that counts. And if you have forces which have the understanding of the right principles, as we had in the American Revolution, or in other cases, then you can win. You can win against superior forces. but you have to operate that way. So I thought that would be relevant to put this on the plate at this time.